This is Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Tang Garden, which is a really beautiful Euro game that I just got to play for a few times over this past weekend. Very reflective box, as you can see here, very big box. This is a game I need to be able to show you some things to actually describe my favorite mechanism in the game. So I'm going to show you some photos from the games that we played this past weekend. Because Tang Garden, it's a Euro game. It's about getting points. You're trying to get the most points in the game. And you do so in a couple simple ways, essentially. There's set collection. There's some characters that are going to give you some points at the end of the game. And you're also trying to earn money throughout the game through a tile building element in the game. There are three mechanisms that I want to highlight real quick, and I need to show you some photos to show you what it looks like, because the game, here's what it looks like on the table. This is an endgame photo. These are all the characters that I've earned throughout the game, some cards that I've accumulated, some tracks that I moved up on my board, depending on which tiles I've placed, and the board itself, which has a very nice 3D nature to it, very satisfying 3D nature to it, which relates to some of the things I'm going to talk about in a second. So the first mechanism is that you have these characters. You start out with one of them, and any character that you have has an ongoing ability, an extra way to get coins, maybe a way to break a rule in the game, and an end game scoring ability based on something that I'll describe in a second. But as you can see here, I have four characters. I've earned them throughout the game, and there's a miniature on one of them, which means that is the only character whose ongoing ability I currently have. Because as a rule in the game, you can only have one ongoing ability at any given time. The rest of the abilities, whenever you gain a character, you gain the card and their miniature, you have to choose between the characters you already have and put one of those miniatures on the board itself, which relates to another mechanism that I'll talk about in a minute. But I thought this was a really clever design move, that you're required to do this. That you're required to put one of the miniatures on the board and keep only one of the ongoing abilities. While it means that the abilities don't stack, and so there's not necessarily a sense of progression, it does mean that at certain times you might max out. Actually, no, that's not true. You can't do that. But I just like that it keeps you kind of a little bit flat. Normally in games I love progression, but I love that you're not overwhelmed by the number of abilities here, which I'm guessing they found in playtesting, that playtesters just kind of forgot to use how many different abilities they had. Or maybe they were stacking them too much, they're becoming too powerful. So I really like that. The other mechanism that I'm alluding to a number of times is related to the miniature that you actually place on the board and their endgame scoring points. Because what matters is what that character can see. And so when you put them on the board, here's a closer up view of the miniature, not on the board, but when you put them on the board, you orient the miniature to face one of the four directions. And on the board itself, or surrounding the board, are these vertical slots. Hopefully you can see that a little bit in this photo here. There are these slots that allow you to slot in tiles vertically, and each of the tiles has a beautiful picture on it, a beautiful panorama picture, and also some icons on it. And the icons are part of the set collection. So I might have someone, I don't know if it was this game or the other game, but I had one character who wanted to look at waterfalls. And so throughout the game, I had this character, I think, fairly early on. Throughout the game, whenever I gained these vertical tiles, I put them over here on this side of the board, put them all over there. So there were a ton of waterfalls over there. And then I put my character out facing those tiles, those vertical tiles, so she could see all these waterfalls, and I could get a bunch of points at the end of the game. I thought that was really clever. I love the idea of slotting tiles vertically into the board to create this beautiful vista, to add that 3D, that elevated element to it, and the idea that what my characters are looking at matters at the end of the game. Last, the one other mechanism I wanted to mention is a really clever little thing that I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, because it requires you to remember something throughout the game. There's no other visual cue. But you have these four stacks of tiles around the corners of the board, and throughout the game, you're going to be, one tile will be face up on each stack usually, but you don't automatically refresh the next tile next to it. There's a timing to it. There are two different times where you'll do that. Basically, when there's only one tile left that's face up, then you'll refresh all of them. Or after a player chooses to draw cards and gain a card on their turn, then you'll also refresh them. And it's related to those cards that I really like this little tiny timing mechanism, which is the number of cards you draw is always equal to 2 plus the number of stacks of tiles that have a top that the top tile is face down. So like currently, I can't exactly say it, but I think 2 of these stacks have face down top tiles. And so if I were to draw cards right now, instead of just drawing 2 cards, I would draw 4. 2 for the basic, and then 1 for each of those stacks. This creates a really interesting timing element to the game because there's certain times where it's just inherently better to draw cards, but you might even see a tile out there, a face-up tile that you really want to place at that time. So it's an really interesting decision point as to when you choose to draw cards or when you place tiles, which are the only 2 things that you can do on your turn as core actions. It's just a little thing, but I love that the value proposition of drawing the cards changes based on something completely different that's happening in the game that you have to pay attention to and that is impacted by other players and yourself. Just a really clever mechanism. Those are my three favorite things about Tang Garden. If you have a different mechanism that you'd like to discuss, or if you'd like to further discuss any of these mechanisms, or share any other games that have mechanisms like these, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks.